God is good to me, ever present help in time of need. He is my shelter in times of storm, in seasons of winter. He keeps me warm, and I believe. He's there for me. Yes, I believe. He's there for me.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Southern Virginia homestead. It's a beautiful day out here today, and this morning I am sitting with the food forest behind me, the future food forest site. Now, I say future because it's for the future, right? It's for self-sustainment, food self-sustainment. And although it is for the future, it started almost as soon as we got here. So I've lived here full time for going on a year and a half. One of the first things I did when I got down here was I was able to get some wood chips. A tree company dropped off a load, and I spread on the far side behind me, but over there, an area, and just spread them out and let it start to work on the ground. The ground down here is very clay, hard, doesn't drain water easily. It's hard to dig. It's very hard clay, red clay. And so already that's been sitting just over a year. About a month or so ago, I went to plant 2 elderberry bushes, and right on the line where the chips were, I went to dig just outside of that line. I could barely stick the shovel in the ground. And granted, it's probably the worst time to dig because it's, you know, the sun beats on it. We hadn't got a lot of rain, so that clay really gets to be like concrete-like almost. And so I literally could just about had all I could do to stick the shovel in the ground. And so I moved over about 6 feet into the area where the chips had been sitting for a year, and I raked away the chips, and I easily dug the hole to put the you know, they were probably in 2-gallon containers. Easily dug the hole into the clay underneath. So, you know, that, and it could just be from the moisture, holding the moisture in the ground, but you can see the top, you know, inch or so is teeming with worm life, and it's starting to work on that soil, and it's taking on a different color. It's richer, and it's only been, like I said, a year, so it hasn't really gone that deep. It's just starting to do that, and I realize it takes several years to really achieve that. But already we're seeing a difference. I've already planted 2 elderberry bushes, 2 fig trees, 2 plum trees, and I'm going to continue. I've been propagating out my berries, so I want to continue those rows. I planted a grape over here. Since I've moved here, been here a year and a half, I started almost immediately trying to prepare this area. And yet, if I am honest, and if I think about it completely, it will be years before it may never really be done, right? Because I can keep adding to it every year. I can keep planting new things, and I plan to. I've put some asparagus plants in also, 10 little baby asparagus plants, and those should grow every year. They should, you know, as they go through their cycle and drop their seed, it should, I know I talked about this in a previous video, but just to expound a little bit more on it, as the years progress, the the vitality of the food forest should progress by adding more plants, by the ones that are here propagating themselves out a little more, and by me working to propagate them out, such as I'm doing with the berries, tip planting and trying to fill in those rows. And I eventually want to do a natural fence all the way around with berries and or grapes in certain areas, and so that's going to take years to do that. So it is the site of the future food forest, but it's also the site of the present food forest, which in many ways is in a rudimentary stages, very incomplete and very, very beginning stages. But that's okay, because it's a process, and that self-sustainability that we'll get from it is going to be a process. And it's all part of, I talked about this before too, it's part of that aging in place, right? It's, 30, 40 feet from the house, and as it continues to grow and continues to establish itself, it should be less and less maintenance. And I know there's always going to be pruning, there's always going to be adding chips here and there, but setting it up and laying out the initial cardboard and the initial chips is really, doing all the initial planting. Most of that work is front-loaded. Now, the whole process has not been an easy one. When I got here, I put in my name with the power company to get chips, and nothing ever came of that. That was actually before I even moved here, and I've updated it several times. And I've seen the guys doing the tree clearing in the area, and I've stopped every time and asked them, and no exaggeration, I had to stop and talk to people at least 18 times, and every single time they've responded with, "Oh yeah, we'll come, we'll dump off loads," and very seldom, did they. So we can't get discouraged, right? That's the point. We have to keep persistent, keep persisting, keep stopping, keep talking to them, keep getting that assurance that they're going to come, even to be let down when they never do. And then I hit one guy that, he said the same thing, and he didn't show any more or less enthusiasm than all the other guys. And he said, "Yeah, sure, we'll drop some off." And I said, "Okay," and you smile and you be pleasant and you leave thinking, "Yep, whatever, okay, they're never coming, but I'm going to continue to stop." And he did come, and he came probably 8 times. And so if he's got, whatever, they got almost 3 to 5 yards on their truck, he might have come 10 times. I think he came around 8. I'm going to estimate I got about 40 yards. So that was a productive visit. So, in a lawn, you stop and you talk to the head of that crew. The result of that is 40 yards of chips. But behind the scenes of that is, a dozen and a half other stops that didn't yield anything. So it just speaks to that point of the need for persistence, the need to stay on these things, because it doesn't just happen overnight. You don't just wake up, talk to somebody, and all of a sudden you got all the chips you could ever use. It's just not the way it is. And one guy, there was a guy doing some same tree company. They were working on a private property, and I stopped and I asked him, and I says, "Here we go. We're just going to go through the motions again." And it gets discouraging because you get that feeling like you're spinning your wheels. And he was excited to have the opportunity. He said, "Oh, are you heading up to home now?" I tried to explain to him where I lived. He said, "Are you heading home now?" I said, "Yeah, I am." He said, he yelled to his guy. He said, "Unhook the chipper, follow this guy." And they came right out and dumped a big load. And he was even able, I was here when he dumped, so he came right back here and dumped right on the site, which was even better, because then I didn't have to tractor it up here a bucket at a time. But you see, then just the other day, same situation down the other side of the main road leading in, a couple miles away. They were on private property, stopped and talked to that crew leader. Same thing. "Oh yeah, tell us where you are. How do you get there? We'll be glad to come." They never did. So it's hit or miss, but it takes persistency. Same thing with the cardboard, right? I've stopped numerous places looking for cardboard. There was a produce distributor that had big stacks of nice thick cardboard sitting out in his lot. They were breaking down boxes, and I stopped and asked them, "Well, we reuse it, and okay, that's understandable." So you move on. You ask somebody else. One guy wanted to sell something. He said, "Well, we don't give it away, but we'll sell it." So, of course, you know, I don't have any money budgeted for cardboard, so I just said, no, I'm just going to continue to look. Well, I think it was 3D Tripper, part of the X Nation community. She had commented on a video that I did saying, oh, it's the dollar store, Dollar Generals or whatever. And so I did. I stopped at a couple of them. My wife actually stopped at one and talked to them. They said, yeah, take all you want. And so I stopped at one when I was out the other day, and they had probably 8 of those bins in the back. And she said, yeah, take whatever you want. And I went out there and I filled up my car and actually went back to another one and got 2 loads. So I was able to prepare the area that I did here from that. So again, it's that same thing. It's that persistence, because you stop and you get told no, or you know they're going to sell it to you, or they reuse it, or whatever, and you just move on and don't get discouraged, don't get disappointed, because then you hit. It's like hitting the vein of gold when you're mining, right? You hit one where it's like, yeah, take all you want, and you fill up your car twice. So, so it can be done, and it can be done that way, and that's really what it takes. It takes that persistence. It takes that not giving up, that staying with it, and you know, just trying to move forward, you know, a little bit at a time. This section that I put down the other day, even if I don't do any more, let's say this year, this is already starting to work on the soil. It's an area that I can plant in next year, and where I'm planting now was the area that I put the chips down when I first moved in. So it will be built in phases, and the important thing is to get, because at first I was going to go ahead and build it all and then start planting, and then I quickly realized that because these resources trickle in a little at a time, if I did it that way, it could be a year or even years before I was able to plant anything. And so I kind of shifted gears and just started planting stuff, and then I build the chip structure around it, because you know, the most important thing is to get those plants in the ground, get those roots established, because like the fig trees I planted the other day, they probably won't bear fruit. I know they won't bear anything this year. They may or may not bear fruit next year. I'm not really sure. I'm still learning about that, how that all works with the figs, and the same thing with the plums. Now I think the Santa Rosa plum, they were probably 3-year trees when I bought them, so I think there's a chance they might produce fruit next year. I'm not sure, but the point is, the sooner I get them in the ground, the sooner the roots get established, the sooner they start to grow, the sooner I'll get that fruit. So however long it does take, I'm doing it in sections like that rather than waiting until I prepare the whole area, just because it doesn't make sense to do that. But that's kind of the process of how I learn, because in the beginning that was my mind, was I'm going to go and I'm going to do this area, and then I'm going to plant. Same thing with the fence. I want to do a fence, and my budget is small, and I start looking at all these different options for fencing, and I've got about 300 feet of fence around the perimeter, and so that gets expensive. And then my watermelon and my cucumbers, well, the cucumbers, they didn't bother too much. We picked most of them, but I had a bunch of little watermelons and a bunch of little cantaloupes, and some little like field rat or vole or something ate every single one of them. And so I'm looking at that, and I'm like, well, no matter what I put up for a fence, they're gonna get through that. We're not gonna keep those out, you know, keep them out. So one of the main predators I want to keep out is deer, and fence will do that. But the fencing options are expensive, and so what I'm going to try to do, and it's going to take a lot of time, is I'm going to put the T-posts in and wire between them. I saw Oxjaw do around his garden bamboo, and I love the look of that. And I'm trying to source bamboo, and with limited success. Like most people, you know, it's expensive too. It can be, and some people have it for free at certain times. I've seen ads before, and so when those come up, I will take advantage of them. But that's not something that's going to be built in a week or two either. But ideally, what I'd like to do is do a natural fence with the berries and the grapevines, and so I can do that relatively inexpensively by putting the T-posts up and just running wire between them, and then, you know, planting my berries, and just I'm tip planting 7 little buckets now. So if I get, if I get a 50% rate on those, success rate, I'll have, 3 or 4 little plants that I can plant along that fence line. And I'll just keep doing that, keep propagating them. They grow tall. I showed you how I did that in the last video. Bring the top down and tip plant them, fill in those rows. But that's going to take years. That's going to take years to do that. And then they have to grow to the point, this one right behind me, I think you can see it. Those were 2 plants that I planted several years ago. Well, several years ago. I was living here when I did it, so it had to be last spring, so it's 1.5 years ago. Now, they're getting to the point where they're starting to fill in. I put the T-posts in the wire, and I, tied them up, and they're almost to the point where they can be the start of a fence or a hedge. But again, it's going to take time. The ones that I planted before I moved here was the back row. They're filling in pretty nicely. And so if you look at that row, that's going to be where the back fence is. That one's already well established. And, and again, it's not going to stop the little creatures from coming in. And so I'll have to evaluate that down the road. I may need to put a short little fence along it on the bottom to keep the little creatures out, the rabbits and the whatnot. But if I grow things in a certain way, I can mitigate the damage they can do. The rabbits can't, get up several feet anyway. So same thing with those rats. If I tie up the watermelon and the cantaloupe up on a trellis or cattle panel or whatever, maybe I can mitigate the damage those things can do as well. And so those are all things that I'm learning as I go, and they're things that, a lot of that experience and knowledge is going to be born out of mistakes that are made along the way, and that's okay too. But I have a general plan for how I want it to unfold and what I want it to look like, and it's going to take time, and it's going to take persistence, because just like with the chips and with the cardboard and with these practices, there'll be failures. There'll be times when when I try to do something that doesn't work out, just like the tip planting. I was planted in buckets in Connecticut, brought those all down here. Every bush I have here, every berry bush I have in those back rows came with me when I came down here to work on the house from Connecticut, and I would tip plant the ones I had in my yard up there into buckets, and I would bring them. And I don't know if the conditions were just better, maybe because it's hotter here and I'm doing it in the summer, I'm not having a greater success rate. But up there when I did it, I tip planted them, I'd have like an 80% success rate. And so every time I came down, I'd bring 4, 5, whatever, half a dozen, and plant them, and that's how I established those rows. And so using those practices, but I tip planted into buckets the beginning of the season when it first started to get hot, probably 7 or 8, and every single one of them died. And so I don't know if it was just the wrong time of year, it's just too hot to do it, or I didn't keep them watered enough, or whatever it was. I'm not really sure. I got some ideas where I went wrong, but that's one of those things where that persistence just needs to come into play, because just because that was a failure, what did I really waste other than a little time? Because I'm propagating them from what's there, so it didn't cost me any money. I had the pots, I put the compost in there. It really didn't cost me anything but time. Same thing with the ones I got going here now. So now I'm realizing, like, okay, maybe one thing I can do is really try to stay up on keeping them. Maybe I let the soil dry out. I don't think I did, but I'm going to really stay on top of them and see if that makes a difference. We're later in the season now, although it is still hot, it should, going forward, cool down a little. Now I'm going to, just did that the other day, so it should take 3 weeks or so until they establish. I'll probably leave them for 4 weeks. I'll probably leave them to September 1st. Then I'll cut them, and then if they seem like they're healthy and they're viable, then I'll go ahead and put them in the ground, and that should still give me enough time to establish that root system in the ground before it gets cold, before winter comes. And I may even have time to do another batch on top of that after that, depending. I'm going to see, but there's no reason why I can't start that now too. So going forward, that's going to be a key. But again, it takes persistence. It takes that not getting discouraged by those failures along the way, because that's really just speaks to the education of it all. The failures just lends to how I learn and move forward from that. So I think that that's important to note, because there can be a lot of failures in this, because I've never done this, and I've just started to like research it and, you know, see what other people are doing and the practices of it. And so every area of the country has different climates, and so the process might be slightly different. And so I have to adapt it to where I am, figure that out. And that's the only way to do that is to get out and do it and make those mistakes, and then move on from there. And that's what I'm going to try to do. So I think that ultimately, in the long run, from a food self-sustainability point of view, the permaculture food forest is definitely the way to go. Now, how we're going to get from where I am now to there, you know, that's a whole other thing. That's a whole other story. That's going to be a process in itself, and it's going to be something that, you know, we're going to learn as we go. And so I just want to thank you all for, you know, coming along, for following me along my journey, and, you know, we can learn together. So I'm certainly not portraying myself to be an expert at any of this. I'm just pushing forward the best I can and learning the best I can of how I go. And anybody has suggestions or has, you know, things that they've tried that have worked, or things that they've tried that didn't work, I'll be glad to consider all those things, because that's a way that, you know, as a community we can push forward together. And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. Genesis 1:29. We have to get ourselves back to the garden. The Garden of Eden was the first permaculture food forest, the original design in agricultural self-sustainment. Thank you all for watching. Appreciate it, and God bless you.